Hello, I'm Lynn Alexander, and I'm here with Daryl Parry from the Easton Book Festival, and we're now on our fourth year. We have over 80 programs this year, some in person, some virtual, like this one. And tonight we welcome an amazing guest, Karen Lillis. Karen has written novellas, short stories, memoir, poetry, received the ACRA Award for Avant-Garde Excellence in Fiction in 2014. A lot of accomplishments, a lot of writing, and we're very honored to have Karen here tonight as our guest and to ask some questions, hear some reading, and I think it would be a good idea for Daryl if you want to introduce yourself a little bit. You don't have. Well, Daryl is here hosting tonight with us. What I should probably, I'm going to stop it and start over because I feel like I put you on this. Hello, I'm Lynn Alexander here with Daryl Parry from the Easton Book Festival. We're now on our fourth year. We have over 80 programs this year, some in person, some virtual like this one. Tonight we welcome an amazing guest, Karen Lillis. She's written novellas, short stories, memoir, poetry, received the ACRA Award for Avant-Garde Excellence in Fiction in 2014. A lot of accomplishments, a lot of books. And in a minute, I'm going to ask Karen to say a little bit about herself. But Daryl, I thought maybe you could say a word of welcome as we get started.
All right. Hello out there. Lynn and I are members of the Book Festival board, and we're really excited to kick off this year's events, and especially with this program here because we got Karen, and Karen is awesome.
Absolutely. So Karen, if you don't mind, if you just to kind of catch us up, what you've been working on, tell us a little bit about maybe some of your books, and what you've been involved with the past couple of years.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a bookseller and a writer. I've definitely been very heavily involved in book selling the last few years during the pandemic, trying to ensure that my day job at a used bookstore is solvent, and just the journey we've all been on as booksellers, trying to reach out to our community and make sure that we're all supporting each other. And so it's only been recently that I've really gotten back to writing, as like, oh, okay, the day job is okay, and now I can really fly on the writing. I think earlier I was doing a lot of my own book selling on the side, just as like a anxiety valve or something. Also because I love book selling, but yeah, so lately I've been getting back to writing as an escape from the crazy news, because every time you turn on the news, it's crazier. So I just want to keep going back into, let me write another 90s story set in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. So I've been working on, one of my things is I have a lot of unfinished manuscripts, half-finished manuscripts, and I have to just pick one or two and try and finish them, and stop having all these unfinished piles around me. So I have a book in progress called The Greenpoint Trilogy and Other Stories, and so they are mostly stories set in Brooklyn in the 90s to turn of the millennium, and yeah, so I've been really enjoying getting into short fiction lately, as opposed to kind of when I started writing, which was a transition out of photography. I just like came out of the gate like wanting to write book length things, and they were short books, but they were book length. And then I had to figure out, oh, well, if I wanted to get published in a journal, how do I chop up an experimental novella to, give something like with no context around it? So that was kind of a weird thing. So that got me wanting to write poetry, to just have things to submit and read and that kind of thing. So yeah, so I've been enjoying like a new journey with short fiction. So.
All right. Well, thank you. I was thinking about what you said about without context, and sometimes microfiction, flash, different terms for it, but basically short fiction is Is that something that appeals to you about it? Not, to have kind of a, something out of context of a larger novel. I'm thinking about even like, the photography comment you made, and the idea of sort of, a vignette or something short. I mean, I'm curious about what appeals to you about the short form, I guess.
Right. So yeah, short stories and microfics are two totally different forms for me. I've been writing these 50-word microfics, so those are really different than my old short stories. Used to be more like 3,000 words. Now that's considered really long in the publishing world. So I keep trying to write things that I'm aiming for 1,000 words, and I never, I usually make it to like 2,500 words or something like that. Anyway, yeah. So what appeals to me, the microfic, I know what you're getting at with the sort of out of context, like a little snapshot vignette. And yet I think every time I write a microfic, it turns into a series of microfics. So I've rarely written ones that are really, really standalone. But I do really like, I do like the sort of, how do I put it? The way short fiction evokes so much of backstage drama, there's so much like world that you have to imagine or evoke or convey in order to, you're writing this story, but there's a whole world that has come before and after with these characters. And the other thing that makes me think of with short fiction, I've been reading one of my favorite writers of the form, Frank O'Connor, who's really well known for that story Guest of the Nation. That's like in every school anthology, but I that's like one of my least favorite stories of his, but it doesn't seem to be representative of his stuff. But so he does a really good job of having like the voice of a storyteller, like a character voice most times. And so he's getting at like, the art of storytelling, but also this colloquial voice. And so it's really, really close to poetry. And he said that he was a failed lyric poet and that short stories were actually the closest thing to lyric poetry for him. And so it's really amazing to read them and just feel like there's no word out of place, and there's a total like cadence to the whole story. And so to sort of have a form that's that tight but that that long is really exciting to me. Like poems maybe end too soon for me as a writer.
Right. It's interesting you use the word tight because, as you know, I mean, I go back with 50-word fiction, to the Blink Ink days. That was something that I worked with Doug on for many years, and it's a challenge to do a tight story, in that few bit of words. You only get 50. So, I think that's very challenging. So I wanted to kind of go back to the novels. And one of the things that I'm always curious about, and I like to ask about is, and it's a difficult question, but that idea of, I think when we think back to the years that we've been writing, many of us, something kind of stands out, a project, a book, a novel, where it's almost like this is our baby, like, sometimes we just hold, certain things closer, than others. And so I guess what I'm wondering, if you don't mind me getting into that, is like, what do you hold close, as opposed to the pieces you do to get the name out, for publication, for, through that perspective, but the things that just, you come back to as your baby.
Yeah. The title that comes to mind for me is a book I started in 2003 called A Guide to New York City circa 1992. And I do think of it as my arcades project, or my Joe Gould, book that's never going to see the light of day or something. But it's, I have written it in spurts, but a lot of it I've written one sentence at a time. And it's like, a combination of like a guide to a foreign country, which New York seemed like to me when I moved there in 92. And like, you had to like read between the lines and listen really close and keep your eyes open for how to, like, what were the rules of this new society so that you didn't get mugged. And so it was like this fascinating thing, like how to figure out the whole, a whole new code of a place, and people. And so it's a combination of like a travel guide and with very concrete things, as well as like a Tibetan Book of the Dead kind of thing, like a spiritual guide to life. And so yeah, it was sparked by both this William Burroughs cut up video I watched, and also a frame at the end of Persepolis, the graphic novel, where her grandmother gives her like this little kind of like homespun wisdom about some girlish thing. I can't remember what it was. And so I was like, wow, like my parents never taught me stuff, which is not true, but like I guess in that grandmotherly kind of way, like maybe that is the grandmother's job and not the parents' job. But I was like, oh, I want a book of like, like things that, yeah, like that my older self would have taught my younger self, or something, like things that I would have wanted to know back then, when I was 21 and moved to New York and just had to figure out everything by mistakes. And anyway, so I've literally written it like, in a million journals, like one sentence at a time, and I write like a little symbol next to it. So now it's like going to be a cataloging project. I'll have to like get a grad student from library school to catalog the book, piece it together, put it on index cards, and then I'll figure out what order it goes in. But yeah, so it's sort of a one sentence at a time prose poem. And it did I got an excerpt published in Wreckage of Reason, a book of experimental writing by women, that I think came out around 2010, maybe. So that's my answer.
Right. And I mean, I can't help but kind of get into, on the urban, life topic, writing about your time at St. Mark's and the bookstore and bagging the beats at midnight. And, I'm going to ask about this because I find it so fascinating, when you work in a place and, you have the opportunity to basically bump into, famous people, iconic people, and I think that people who have not had that experience, I had some of it, going to school in the village, where, you're in a diner late at night and, you look over and you're like, oh, wow, that kind of thing. If you spend time in New York City, it sort of becomes something, I don't want to say you're jaded about, but, it becomes a part of the experience. But the idea of working in a bookstore and having people come in, I think is very, an intriguing idea to people, like something, you kind of, I don't know, like have I guess curiosity about, so I guess I'm a little bit curious. I know that part of the deal is, you don't tell, you don't,
Right.
you don't spill, but, I wondered if maybe just to indulge us with, something, a recollection from that or that experience, of being in that bookstore.
Sure. Yeah. There were a lot of celebrities that came and went. We had people that were regulars, like Richard Hell was a very regular customer, and Diamanda Galas was a regular. And so, those were just like, head nods. And, Richard would come and talk to the magazine buyer for, hours and, about just daily kind of things. And then and then there were the celebrities that I did get starstruck by, including Bjork, who I was downstairs doing, downstairs receiving tasks, receiving books, and someone came in and was like, yeah, Bjork was here. And I was like, oh God, they never tell me when she's here. So I run over to the intercom and intercom my buds upstairs at the back info desk. And I was like, you guys, you never tell me when Bjork is here. And, lo and behold, she's like right next to the info desk, and all my musician coworkers are there like, she's still here, like freaking out, like, Karen, be cool. Can you please not blow our cover? So, that was me being starstruck. But my favorite starstruck was this poet who lives in Ireland and only writes in Gaelic. And I love her translated, I don't read Gaelic fluently, but I've read her translations. I recognized her at the register, and I was like, "Are you Nuala Nigano?" And she was just like floored that I recognized her, and I was like, I could barely talk, you know. She was like, "What are you up to? Like, who is starstruck by someone who has an audience of 200?" You know, so yeah. So I was glad to give that to her, right?
And I think that that is something that I think about with you. Like I always think of you as a person who, under like I feel like you appreciate the quality of a book. Like and I know that sounds, I mean, obviously it's a book festival, we're celebrating books, but I feel like you have a way of like I guess it's the curating, you have a curating kind of mind, even when you curate collections, of vintage books. And I want to kind of ask a little bit about that. And it's up to you if you know how far you want to go with talking about that. But I kind of have always loved and appreciated the fact that you not only deal with books and the book industry, but you also curate, you create collections of feminist fiction, political fiction, just LGBTQ fiction, like and not just fiction, essays and things, of content, so that a reader who's maybe just getting to know a topic has a go-to. So I kind of think of you always as like a librarian first. That's yeah. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that, about your that gig.
Sure. Yeah. What it reminds, like when you talk about curating in this context, what it reminds me of is a woman that I read an interview with a long time ago. Like I don't know if it was late 90s, early 2000s. And she was I think she taught writing in a community setting, not like a university, but some kind of community center in LA. And she was saying, if you want your writing that you love, that you're writing for yourself, if you feel like too alone, you might need to create a community that understands where you're coming from with the literary, voice or something. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I don't know, maybe it sounds a little selfish now that I'm saying it, but it was like, yeah, I was like, oh, I don't want to be too misunderstood. Like so I wanted to create that community of the writers that I loved and the writers that I drew from when I first started writing. People like Annie Ernaux, who just won the Nobel Prize. So cool, because I've been reading her for years. I think all the books I've read of hers are now out of print. And who else? Marie Redonnet was another French novella writer that I loved. And Jean Rhys from Britain. I just love her like spare novellas. So that was my first that was one of my first instincts, was to like say like these writers might be obscure, they're not like directly in the canon, but they're really worthy, and I'm going to create like a buzz around them, kind of thing. I've also been inspired by booksellers. There's a bookseller in Pittsburgh, Copacetic Comics, and his stuff is centered on graphic novels and comics, but then he's got like every other niche thing that he knows about as well, like film books and music books, and his type of nonfiction and fiction. And so he kind of taught me about like niche book selling, where it's like it's cool to just like laser focus on the things that you like, and then that conveys to your readers, like that this is a collection that has a sort of energy emanating off of it.
Right. And I think that might have been that time early on where I almost met you, or I did meet you, but there was a festival in Pittsburgh, and I believe that they were there at Copacetic Comics. And
yeah, they probably were. Yeah, was it the Zine? Did you come to the Zine Fest?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Back in the day, right?
As we say.
But I think that one of the and there have been other efforts on your part to put a spotlight, to kind of, people who, you have wanted to bring more awareness or attention to, because it's been deserved. And I know that there have been other efforts on your part to do that, different, I don't want to call them campaigns, but, I know that you've worked to do that as well. And I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit of that, but I know that was, something that over the years, you've clearly done, we know that about you and appreciate that about you, but I don't know if you want to, say anything about that desire to, get the word out on people who are amazing and you appreciate, but maybe, are not in like the public eye as much as they should be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just kind of, it can be frustrating to watch, people who have like, decent talent, and then they get like, $100,000 of Macmillan advertising dollars behind them, and they skyrocket to fame. And then, somebody who's over here in the small press who's like mega talented and just seems to have a real vision, it just seems like, okay, where's their megaphone? Let's bring the megaphone, that kind of thing. So yeah, just trying to figure out like how to get people over that hurdle, how to how to help, I don't know, yeah, help them get into the right spotlight to I don't know, yeah, I don't know, it does seem like there's so much difference between the people that, like it's just a life-changing difference to get that mega deal from one of the big 6 publishers, and then the rest of us are fighting the good fight, like, day job writing, other life challenges, and it's just so night and day. And it's, I mean, it's not like, oh, okay, I want to get this person the leg up so that they can go into the stratosphere. I guess maybe there's a hope that there's like something in between, and that by boosting someone that we can create an in-between that, I don't know, that yeah, I mean, just sometimes I just feel like people really deserve to have many more readers than just, doing it one reading at a time, but just, to get other community members to vouch for them and say, no, you got to read this seriously.
Yeah, no, I think you definitely do that. And I know over the years when people have said why do so many of us, with presses and things, give that time and give that energy? Because my answer has always been, we can't compete with, the dollars. We can't compete with the advertising and the promotion that those big dollars buy. But, the only thing that we really have is community, is us. That's the only thing that they can't buy, which maybe brings me to a question I'm not sure I want to ask, but we've talked a little bit about booksellers, independent booksellers, small press. We did do that panel, I think it was 2 years ago, and I want to just quickly mention, for anyone listening, that it is archived on the YouTube site for the book festival, Easton Book Festival.
I think there's 2. I think we did one last year and the year before.
Yeah, we did booksellers confessional, and we've done different. Yeah, I think we did another panel too. So, the content is out there. So, I hope people, we can certainly share it. But one of the things that has come up is that, the world is changing. It's even harder to compete with that, and, just the role of booksellers, especially independent booksellers, it's hard. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, if anything has changed since we had those discussions, or,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anything specific has changed other than it's just continues to be challenging. It's so Karen's Book Row right now exists not only online as a vintage shop, but I also have what I call a permanent pop-up in my day job shop. So I manage a used bookstore, and then Karen's Book Row in the bookstore is new books instead of vintage books, so that I don't compete with my boss. So I've been seeing a little bit of both sides of the industry. So one of our challenges has been that we're in a very office heavy area. I mean, we're also near colleges, but enormous amount of office workers in the area, in theory, between the colleges and the hospitals and some museums. And, they all went home in the pandemic for at least the first year. And then, they've only come back in a kind of trickle. And then the ones that did come back to the neighborhood don't eat lunch on the street anymore. And so that used to be like a really big part of our client base. And so now it's a really interesting, but changed, it's undergrads, it's museum tourists. And so it's a very revolving, some large schools in the area. And so you can't necessarily keep track of who you're seeing all the time. So it's the pandemic has kept booksellers on our toes. There's also been, a great uptick in interest in reading. We can't keep fiction on the shelves. So I mean, in one sense, one answer to your question is just, I think that we all realize that we need to be continually adaptable. The supply chain thing is like not an issue for the used bookstores, but it is an issue for the, people getting new books. There's like book delays, and you gotta order really early for the holidays and that whole thing. But I think it did strengthen the community sense in a lot of places. That I've seen people really fall in love with their neighborhood bookstore even more than they already were, really cherish their neighborhood bookstore and support them. Especially ones that are in residential neighborhoods where people are working from home. And I've just seen booksellers, really try and meet their community, more than halfway, and just really try and have that, community feel good, warm, fuzzy vibe. And again, where I work, it's I don't always see these people more than once, so it's a little bit different. It is kind of like working in a port city, and so we just try to change displays all the time, and we're getting tons of books because in the used books business, people are cleaning out their houses like crazy, so we're never short on product. And I mean, it's just been a time of just constant change.
I mean, it's an amazing store. I mean, I've been in it, and it's the kind of place where you don't intend to buy a lot of things, but before you know it, you're browsing, and that's what happens. It has that kind of appeal, for people, who are maybe not intending to purchase, but discover things, which is the way I like to run across things that way. And I don't know, Daryl, if feel free to jump in, on the books, the bookstore and the bookseller, topic too, because I know you have a lot of thoughts about that too, and questions, because I think I think you're right. I think that there is a desire to support, local, at least for some people,
Yeah.
not everyone, but, at least, to do our best, because there's a hopefully, I think there's a sense of value, that it's, the community, just even for the festival. I mean, providing, like the room, the space, to be able to do programs, for the festival, and to bring that to our to our neighborhoods is important.
Yeah. I love the Easton Book Fest, by the way.
And you've been we appreciate you've been a supporter, so which is, but not that I want to talk too much about the selling aspect and the festival aspect, because I really want to ask about your writing, and give you that, make sure we have time for you to share that. So I think that I wanted to sort of touch on that, but I think as you sort of read different pieces, if you don't mind, maybe telling us a little bit about I don't want to say your plan or your intentions, like what are your intentions with these pieces, but a little bit of background, because I think that, I think people might want to know like where they can find, your writing, things like that. So, and we will definitely get into that. But I wanted to ask Daryl, because I'm going to make him get into this conversation. Yeah, I'm going to
Uh-oh.
put him on the spot. I mean, Daryl, do you have any questions from like your observations, as someone who deals with books? I mean, do you notice an uptick in fiction, in maybe, I don't want to say escapism, but maybe pandemic, I don't know. I feel like people have been having a quieter lives. And do you see that as true?
It's difficult for me to say because I kind of just started selling books during the pandemic, so it's kind of difficult for me to say if there's an uptick or not. But I found it interesting, your comment on curating, because I feel like if you stock a store, like a bookstore, you have to curate because you can't possibly sell everything. So there there is definitely that certain, every bookstore has like its own flavor because
Totally.
whoever's buying the books has to choose what to buy, what not to buy. And it's really interesting. That's why I always, whenever I go past any type of small independent bookstore, I always have to go in just to see, like, what the certain vibe of the store is. So I would love to get out to your store sometime, Karen.
Yeah. I hope you do.
All
Hope you
right,
get
and
that.
we have promised that we would do that. We've said it many times. So, we definitely need to do that because, I think, it's important, it is. And I think that's true that, you know, like I said, sometimes you go into a store and you don't know what you're looking for, but then, someone out there has had an idea a little bit maybe about what you're looking for and has maybe, moved you in a certain direction. And I've definitely, discovered authors that way. So, I want to, like I said, I want to give you an opportunity to read, obviously, some pieces. So what, if you don't mind, maybe telling us a little bit about some of what you'd like to share with us.
Okay. Yeah, so I have three pieces I was thinking of sharing. One is a prose poem that also is not so far from my fiction. And that one, it was a series of poems I had started right before the pandemic called friend poems. So it was like just, missing friends and just writing a poem for each of them, instead of just merely missing them. And so that one was a poem based off of a dream. And I really like to write about place. So that one takes place across New Orleans and Cleveland. And let's see, then I have the beginning of a novella, a newer novella that takes place in New York, 1993. A girl from Virginia and a guy from Poland. And it sort of goes back and forth between being the narrator in relation to the guy and the narrator in relation to her friends, because I seem to go back and forth between those two, woman and women friends versus men and women, and seeing where how our relationships change us, how our relationships are a part of us, how they challenge us. And then the third one is something I definitely wrote in the pandemic, and inspired by the Lehigh Valley Poetry Salon. And there are some related microfics. I call them Shirley by the Sea. And so they have a sort of lonely pandemic, lockdown feel. So yeah, do you want me to read one?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so this one is the prose poem, and it's called Poem for Mike Decapite. And let me see. Sorry. Here's a better view. Poem for Mike Decapite. In the dream, I bumped into you in New Orleans. No surprise, we both gravitated to the dilapidated luncheonette that looked like it belonged on Market Street or Great Jones. In this listing city, it was maybe 3 months from melting into moss or collapsing into the canal, maybe 2. Stuffing was poking out of the booths and the menus were stained with drops of roux, but the ceiling blades got the air out of your way and the countertops were spotless. The old cashier waved me in without a breath. Everything is weather, you said, by way of a greeting. Your father's rejection, your writer's affliction, the walk to your bus stop, your sour stomach. You took a sip of cold cafe au lait. Even a hurricane is weather. You weren't interested in patronizing me, only in catching the waitress's attention for a hot top off. Everything blows through, stays a while, everything moves out to sea. You were no one's Svengali, more like an editor on vacation from the sound of other people's cliches. I used to chase chaos. Now I can dig a home in any moment, especially alone. Once the waitress was on the far side of her French donuts again, nothing could come between you and your red notebook. Tip the hat, hit the road, quit the scene. I wasn't sure what I was doing in New Orleans. I woke up before the dream made it clear. Maybe I was looking for Richard Hell in Pirates Alley. Maybe I was after my next sailor's hotel. Maybe I was following the scent of molasses along the Mississippi. Maybe I was looking up my fan club of 3 in Faubourg Marigny. Maybe I was speeding to a familiar transfer point, a well-worn terminus. In days that have long rolled by, I'd lay down with an electric fan and spout the train stops on the Crescent Line like they were raindrops or rosary beads. Picayune, Slidell, City of New Orleans, anything for a little locomotion. In those Virginia years, a sweltering boredom was the mother of all creation. Crawling out of my skin, running until the train ran out of track, writing until the pen ran out of black blood, riding until the night ran out of darkness and into someone else's open window. I was never clever enough to escape the humid spaces. You'd been living down the stairs in the Garden District, staying in a pink house with red walls among the blue bloods. I dreamt you had a rooming house madam named Rose. If I sleep enough, I have lots of dreams. Last night I dreamt I was in a Delaware bus station with a beggar asking for my hand and the loudspeaker repeating, "Last train to Lisbon, last train to Lisbon." Rose's place was filled with bright statuary of her own making, fake flowers and Greek icons and thickly painted saints and goddesses. When she wasn't pruning her home, Rose was blooming herself. She ditched Ohio with an eerie iceberg stuck in her throat, only to become the banshee of Lake Pontchartrain. Cleveland was a fist in a front pocket, but New Orleans is an open mouth, an endless chorus. She shrieked at piano bars or crooned in punk quartets, whoever would feed her, usually wings or fingers, and give her a stage 5 nights a week. She worked the phones and sweet-talked the tavern keepers and bawled the busboys and tipped out the cymbalists and wasn't afraid to spit gravel from Houston to St. Bernard Parish. It barely covers the bills, but it's a living, she told me after the Delacroix show. The rigor mortis bag was fucking killing me, man. Just because Rose had barreled south down the interstate and you'd hitchhiked here by way of London and Mexico City didn't mean you had nothing in common. Truth be told, you'd known Rose in Tremont when she was still underground, when she was a song not yet sung. Jesus, friends don't care about that sort of thing. Friends got X-ray specs. Friends have ESP. You could read between the lines. You could see the tea leaves on the wall. Your friend Rose was much more than the sum of her Cuyahoga neuroses. She was also her own immaculate conception, her own Botticelli rebirth, the still waters, the runaway daughter, the sweet tone of her own someday Gulf Shore glamour trip. So that's that one.
Thank you. You know what, I said that I think of you as a librarian, but I take that back. I think of you as, I think of memories, recollection. I think that's, you have such a gift for, going back to moments and bringing them kind of forth again from the past, I think, you know. But thank you. So I'm hoping you have more, and I
Yes.
know that you do. So
Let's see. I guess I will read. All right, I'm going to read. This is the beginning of a novella in progress. The novella is called American Night, and setting is 1993 in New York. And this is a chapter called A Corner of the Night. If I tried to tell you about Henrique, I'd have to tell you who I was back then, what the world was like, what the city was like. Because the place was different then, and I was different. My eyes saw things differently. Henrique was a sight. With that ice blue gaze and his cryptic lips and his baby smooth skin, he looked a little like James Dean, which means he looked a little like the Polish James Dean, Zbigniew Cybulski, especially when he wore dark glasses. Henrique, what I had with him wasn't love, but it wasn't the absence of love either. More like an inversion, an emotion that could have gone one way and went another instead. Looking back, it seems like 1 minute I was surrounded by my girlfriends, warm and cozy there, and the next they were handing me off to Henrique to take me down that dark alley. If we'd known, would we still have done things the same way? What strikes me now is that they were passing me from my familiar life into the next place, as if moving to the city wasn't half as big as moving into Henrique's sphere of influence proved to be. The whole thing started the night Suzanne and June came to see me for the holiday. We were crowded around my bathroom mirror like so many evenings before. That was the part of the night that could have seemed rushed, making sure we perfected the clothing, the makeup, got an early buzz before we walked out the door. But now it seems like a magic set of moments that held their own in the course of things. In Richmond, we'd long since learned to dress to please each other, to please ourselves, because the boys of Shockoe Bottom weren't gazing at us, weren't dancing for us. If we can take on a room full of drag queens, we can handle a bar full of Soho girls, June drawled as she outlined her dark lips with a darker brush. I mean, it's the same thing, right? You think you guys had never been to a straight bar in your life. Suzanne almost elbowed us out of the picture, working her black eyeliner. I bet you hayseeds are planning on paying for your own alcohol too. I love to watch June pull the mascara across her long, languid eyelashes. I could get lost in the Cleopatra that Suzanne became once she finished drawing her eyebrows. June got meticulous, painting her lips with a thin brush and a little pot of expensive pigment, while Suzanne was more fuck all about it, sweeping her lipstick on with quick strokes and then carving out sharp edges with her fingernails. The three of us had often moved in tandem at art school, been mistaken for one another when apart. But the mirror didn't lie. After several months in a new city, my bangs were growing out. My hair was nearly to my shoulders. I wore a more neutral shade of lipstick. I no longer looked like the same paper doll. June and Suzanne, my beautiful friends, looked more alike than ever. They'd started getting pegged as sisters or twins. Tonight we were headed to the Grand Street bar. We were pausing in the bathroom reflection even longer than usual, but we had to be ready. New Year's Eve was an infrequent opportunity. Flirting was serious business. Bewitching took great concentration. Luring was a lost art. Choosing a worthy man was an ongoing experiment, and making out in a safe place was an essential tool for decision-making. We painted our faces to bring out our radiance and to hide our vulnerability at least a little. We dressed and made up in a room together to transition into the right frame of mind, a mode of looking at the men through each other's eyes. I was often the first one to bring the camera out, or sometimes it was June. So many of our pictures from those years are of those evening rituals. Maybe that's why I remember them best. In those days, I remember feeling desperate to make meaning from the shadows, to find scenarios in the patterns of light and what blocked the light. Beauty was always its own story. Beauty was the thing that didn't need a scenario, the spark of loveliness in a contour, a mouth, an expression. These could anchor a photograph instantly. Beauty was meaning and defied meaning. Maybe that's why I got so stuck in the business with Henrique. I paused on his face and got lost there, trying hard to make it mean something. I ignored our story as it played on because it wasn't the script I wanted or expected. I kept trying to go back to his eyes and the look I'd found there, to start over from the beginning. But when I didn't see what I was searching for, I got stuck in the trying. Beauty seemed inscrutable precisely because of my desire. I wanted Henrique's face to mean something it never would. I was never interested in seeing Henrique for what he was. I pushed the shower curtain aside and stepped into the tub to get a better angle on June and Suzanne. June was working her hair now, doing little finger teases with her bangs, attaching bobby pins on her crown. Suzanne was checking her reflection this way and that, pulling faces, practicing the looks that would stop them in their tracks. We were about to step out into the night already in progress and not return until the night was spent, was tasted, until a corner of it was devoured. Stepping out into the night already underway meant crossing paths with the night hopes of others, the pleasure seeking of others. Henrique was a night dweller, and so in that sense, it's no surprise that I found him there. The thing about these mirror sessions was that the girls were posing, but not for me, not for my camera. It was like being a still photographer on a film set, a publicity person hired for a stage show. My actors were doing all the work for me, applying the shadows, inventing the gestures, creating the costumes, trying on the expressions. All I had to do was hold my breath and shoot. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I always think about like the way that a few things. The short sentences, it's almost like it has almost like a list kind of, like a quality, like it's you sort of have there's a pattern to it. And Henrique kind of made me think of Anselm. Am I kind of right a little bit about that, and watch the doors as they close?
There's some correlation.
That where I almost, where there's sort of like, the camera's on him and then it's off and then it's everything around and then it's back, and I kind of felt that way about Henrique, like, kind of the periphery and everything going on and the other people and the other characters, and then coming back and then pulling away again, almost like you don't want to linger too long. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it kind of made me think of some of those, tendencies, I think that there's a
This
depth.
is the book that Lynn is talking about.
Right. There's a depth, there's, you bring something to characters, there's like that observation quality, of all the things around a person, a character. So I'm glad that you shared that one. So we do, no pressure, but we do have time if you feel like sharing something else, and saying something about it, if anything that you'd like.
Okay, well, that one, I will say that one is not published, but there's two excerpts from the same novella in progress that are, let's see, one is published in Local Knowledge, a print journal out of New York, New Jersey, and one is published in a zine called Submerging Zine, literary zine, also out of New York. Yeah, two other glimpses at that. Yeah, so I'll finish up with some microfics. And yeah, so these again are interrelated. This is a story called Shirley by the Sea. Shirley has burned her bridges behind her, left her job all of a sudden, left her house, and ended up at the beach. So they all have little titles. Do they take sand dollars? Good luck locating her in this no star, no name, off-season, fall-down walk-up with an ocean view. This seaside hamlet was big enough for one cheap hotel, small enough to be overlooked by every tourist brochure. Shirley counts her pancake dollars and hopes she can lay low enough to burn all bridges. She bleeds seaweeds. Sunset was harsher than daybreak. Her dreams were more forgiving than her waking thoughts. Walks along the lonely shoreline helped, tripping over the seashells in her path, chucking them back into the waves. The hotel room was small and blank, cozy and stark. She was unfit for company, including her own. Shoreline decisions. She thought of her pops, who had always taken the polar bear plunge. Every January, a rush into the bracing waves of Coney Island with 50 of his closest friends. What was she afraid of today? October in Delaware, lonelier than his stories. Rush in, Shirley. Jump in, jump in. Mesmerized. She watches the waves build and roll, crest and crash. She watches the waves build and roll, crest and crash. The mighty crest, the thundering crash. The wave disappears. What came before, what follows? It seems like her lives will live themselves. She watches the sea build and roll and crash. The portal. She woke up laughing. A seagull rode the wind past her window. Shirley's laughing and she's thinking, I did it, I did it. She's wanted for so long to walk out of her own life and let its contours crumble. And now, the empty space, the terror and the delight. The heart beats softer than a cherry pit. Shirley wants to be the center of her own life. Listening to the waves, she knows she's closer to the center, but it's not yet a life. What next? Will she become a stargazer, a sailor of seas, a caretaker of marine mammals, or the poet laureate of Slaughter Beach? They say it's wonderful. She could hear the percussive winds and the high brass notes of a band down the shore, somewhere just beyond her sight. Shirley could picture the dancing couples, the black tie waiters, the optimism of it all. But like The Office, it was someone else's life, not hers, not now. And that's what I've got from that story. Thank you.
Wonder about Shirley. I think, I think that there are parts of it that, maybe a lot of us, that idea of running to the shore, running somewhere, burning bridges and, to this small place with the one, motel, I
Right.
feel like there's a lot to Shirley's world.
Yeah, and you were saying before that you find a lot of memories in my writing, which is true. I really do draw on I guess like how much the world has changed, and so feeling like there's a whole world preserved in amber in my memory, and I want to write it down on paper and give it life. But surely it was a departure from that. It was just like, let me invent something. Let me weave something. And yeah, for some reason I was having a lot of dreams about a Delaware bus station that I've been in a number of times. And so I just, that was sort of the hinge point, like what would this person be doing in the Delaware bus station? And then like, okay, what was before the bus station or what came after the bus station? And but yeah, just sort of trying to make some imaginative life out of lockdown, out of quarantine, this weird, just this weird, really different, level of socializing, even though I go out of the house to the bookstore, but it's still, it's still not quite like, seeing people on purpose. And
Right. And so the idea of, memories like in amber and sort of the way that, sometimes the mind preserves, eras and times and, just does, there,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I have dreams and memories of certain times in my life too, I mean, not to reveal one's age here, but in the recording, but definitely, there were periods, the 90s, there, for whatever reason, music and things, we all kind of have our comfort places too, where, looking at the world in front of us, maybe now, or the things that are going on, the things that we're listening to. I have a lot of, I miss a time when I felt more hopeful about things. I miss a time when I felt more at peace, and maybe that's a luxury that wasn't deserved at the time, but I think that there was a time where I definitely had more positive feelings and less fear, and I miss those times. I miss feeling, the way that I felt in that world compared sometimes to the way that I feel in the world right now. And I wonder if maybe there's some of that, for you or for other people, of, that sense of, maybe every generation has this idea that things were better way back than they are now. It's just something that we do, it's we get nostalgic, and but I think about that, and I wonder if, the pandemic, I mean, you can't not talk about the pandemic because it's had such an impact, I think, on people. It's I don't know if you want to say anything about, more about writing during the pandemic, but it seems like it has fueled your, not just your memories, but your creativity.
Like I said earlier, it did just get to a point where I was like, oh, okay, like I have a motivation to want to recreate this world that, like you said, like had sort of more positive feelings, and it's really the pandemic has, working with the public in the pandemic has been a bit of a front row view to watching the disintegration of like a cooperative society. Like, it's just amazing to me, like how people just don't really want to cooperate on a lot of different levels, and that's not true across the board. I mean, in some ways people are going the extra mile, but it's been really rough. It's like, just a lot of things that I took for granted, are disintegrating, and so it's made me want to prioritize, right? Where it's like, okay, the world that I knew is not sticking around, and I don't know, it seems to be like fast and furious that's coming, and so I'm like, yeah, it's not only like preserving things in amber, but also just like, okay, creativity is like the reason I'm on this earth as far as I can tell, and so like I better do that, because I don't know what Putin's up to, and I want to make that like a big priority, and just get back to it. I really had stopped writing for like a year and a half or something in the pandemic, because it was just like, save the bookstore, save the work block, and I was just really wrapped up in that. But going to the Lehigh Valley Salon was really great place for me to be. It just seemed like a positive escape, like creativity seems like a positive escape, an escape that's not irresponsible, I guess.
And I appreciate that you came. I mean, the backstory on that is that, for many years, we had a lot of open mics, different poetry events, and then things shut down, and we started to wonder, two things: where are people finding community, and what about people who need community, who that's what sustains them. There are some people who really need people around them, who need that sense of having others, and we started to worry about that. And I think we've learned that we were able to welcome people who previously had been often excluded, it became a way to be more inclusive of many people too. So that's something that I came to like about it, the ability to to welcome people, who would, maybe, it wasn't easy. I mean, I've been there to get to readings, with kids, a job, we all have different challenges and barriers. So, it was a way I felt like to just welcome people. And I always really valued, that you came in and that you shared and that you, were part of that. And, I appreciate that, for everyone who came. And Daryl, because Daryl is, of course, he's, behind a lot of these efforts. He's like that guy that helps out, that pitches in, and friend to everyone type of thing. And that's been very helpful. Definitely helpful. But before we let you go and we kind of end our talk, I'm wondering if there's anything that maybe we didn't talk about that, I mean, yeah, you're on this, you're here to be creative and to create, right? And getting back to that, is there anything that, you want to just say about that, like what comes next, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I alluded to earlier that I have all these unfinished manuscripts, and I think that life just got really busy as an adult, and so like there would just be interruptions. Like I graduated from library school, or I was looking for jobs for a long time, or whatever, different things, and so my manuscripts got interrupted, and so I think that finishing what we start is part of our creative responsibility to ourselves, right? And it's not the easier end of it. Like now that I'm trying to finish this book of short stories, which, sorry, I did not read any of any of those tonight. Yeah, now I'm finding, oh well, now I'm in the middle of 5 short stories that are not finished, and so always having to learn more about ourselves creatively, and our habits, like what's up with this like not finishing thing, and but yeah, I guess the other thing that I would say about writing short stories, to go back to an earlier question of yours about what I'm enjoying about the short fiction, is that it's really interesting because as I go along, I am learning more. I learn more with each story, and then can go back and apply it to the story that I started, or even finished. But I'm editing as I go, because I'm learning more with each story. So that the first story I wrote in this series, which was back in like May or June, I look at it now and I'm like, oh, well, this is a memoir piece. This is like one of my old things that's really shaped like memoir. And then it has kind of like a fiction ending tacked on. But now I really have to like go back and write an understory, and which is like a fictional story, to give it the shape of fiction, because it's got like sort of the wallpaper of memoir. But it's not really a story as such yet, and so it's like I didn't see that at all the first time I wrote it. I was like, oh, it's perfect, it's great, but then I got weird feedback from some of my writer readers, and I was like, why? Anyway, so I think that's a fascinating thing I'm learning at this end of things. I always find that when I start a new project, it's like having a blank canvas, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm always like learning all over again, starting all over again. And so that's always fun. But this one is kind of a different version because it's, a series. And so I'm learning as I go, and can apply it as I go as well. And, apply it a little bit retrospectively, if that makes sense. So.
No, it does. It does. And so before we let you go, do you feel like bringing your cat onto camera? I always, enjoy seeing the cats. And
let me see if
I thought she said hello. Not that I want to put you on the spot, but
no, it's fine. The old man said hello, and he doesn't like to be picked up, but the young girl just came in. Where'd she go? Rosie, Rosie, come here.
Lena always has to stir up trouble on Zooms.
Come here. Oh, she's being evasive.
Oh, she knows. Well,
here's the old man.
Oh,
That's O. Henry, one of my favorite writers, but I didn't name him, but he happened to come with the name of one of my favorite writers.
Oh, see, I knew we'd get a cat on camera.
Right? The short story cat. Yes, I grew up associating O. Henry with beach trips, actually, not to Delaware, but oh, he didn't like that. Anyway, yeah, so O. Henry was a writer that we read at the beach when I was a kid. So that was my early short story introduction. And I've lived a lot of places that O. Henry has lived. Boston, New York, where else? Oh, geez, now I'm gonna forget. My boyfriend has lived like the other half of the places that O. Henry's lived. Greensboro.
You need a little map. You need to O. Henry pins.
Right.
Little faces.
Anyway, I'll get back to
fun,
you.
actually. It's like something I would have in my office.
Right.
Creepy O. Henry thumbtacks or something.
Right.
But well, thank you very much. Thank you, Daryl, of course, always, working on things and helping out with these schemes, ideas, I always seem to have some kind of idea about something that I want to do. And I definitely wanted to do this because, I wanted to have some time just to, talk about your work. And I appreciate that we got to do that. So, yeah, any last thoughts before we stop?
I don't think so. Just that, I love the welcoming energy that you both have, for the salon and for the festival. I just love the sort of like open arms, open-ended, it just leads to a lot of creativity, it's a very particular vibe, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. It's not a competition, we all really can win,
Right.
This idea that, we're all like, chasing something, what, you get to a certain point in a certain age where, you realize like, it doesn't matter. We all can create, and there's room for everyone, and I really believe that. And that I hope that I bring that that idea. But thank you. And thank you, Daryl. And yeah, this is Easton Book Festival. Thank you.
Yay.